Do you spend hours in your head thinking about something that happened, could have happened, or might happen? Do you ask others what to do so you don't make a mistake? Welcome to the Playing It Safe podcast. I am Dr. Z, your host. I am a clinical psychologist, an author, and a person that is super passionate about sharing with you science-based skills to overcome any type of fear-based struggles. Who doesn't experience fear? Who doesn't play it safe? In this show, we will discuss how fear-based reactions happen in day-to-day life, how playing it safe behaviors look like, sound like, and feel like, how you can put into action solid tips from behavioral science to get unstuck from worries, fears, obsessions, and anxieties, and how you can start doing what works, what matters, and what you care about. Behavioral science doesn't have to be boring. Thanks for listening, and let's get started. What do you do when your mind is relentlessly criticizing you? What are the skills that you need to put into action when your mind starts criticizing you? Welcome back, everybody. This is Dr. Z, and in this episode, I am sharing with you a conversation I had with a colleague and a friend, Joe Oliver. Joe is a clinical psychologist. He's an associate professor and program director for the University College London postgraduate program in cognitive behavior therapy. He's the founder of Contextual Consulting, an organization providing training, supervision, and therapy in acceptance and commitment therapy in UK. He's the author and editor of several books. He has published numerous peer-reviewed scientific articles and leads randomized controlled trials in ACT and mindfulness-based stress reduction interventions. One of Joe's specializations includes acceptance and commitment training for people with low self-esteem. In this episode, Joe and I chatted about what is self-esteem, how to handle self-criticism, how to notice when you are entangled with your mind, how to notice and catch your playing it safe moves, how you can deal with negative stories, and we also dive into a particular process of acceptance and commitment therapy called diffusion. Diffusion refers to the process of stepping back from all that thinking that your mind is constantly doing and watching those thoughts for what they are. They are part of your experience, but they don't define who you are. I really appreciate Joe's approach to psychological flexibility and how he puts into action principles from acceptance and commitment training into his day-to-day life. I really hope you find this episode helpful, and I encourage you to go to the notes of the episode on the website www.thisisdrz.com so you can find more resources about it. On another note, I want to encourage everyone listening to this episode to go to the website and complete that Playing It Safe questionnaire so you can identify your Playing It Safe profile and recognize all those thinking strategies, all those playing it safe moves that you are relying on. But if they go unchecked, they will keep you living a contradiction between the life you want to live and the life that you are living. Your playing it safe profile will give you the awareness you need to stop living small, to stop relying on ineffective playing it safe moves so you can start living with purpose every day you are awake. The website again is www.thisisdrz.com and just select the option that says Playing It Safe questionnaire. I wish you a great day, and without further ado, let's jump onto the conversation with Joe Oliver. Perhaps I can start asking you about any time in which you play it safe. When I think about playing it safe moves, I am thinking about all the things that we do privately in our head and publicly with our behavior to manage worries and anxieties. I think that we all play it safe. The challenge is when we play it safe too much and too quick.
Yeah, I've been known to play it safe. Fairly regular occurrence. Absolutely. And the thing is, playing it safe, it's appealing, I find. It's, as the name says, it's nice and safe. It's nice and cozy and comfortable. And that's why, personally, I find it so appealing. And I'm sure lots of people do. And probably the place I would play it most safe would be with other people. And there's a few particular scenarios where I really, really like to play it, and others that stand out. But, you know, when I meet new people, I'll play it safe. When I'm around people I feel a bit uncertain about, I'll play it safe. When I'm standing up in front of a whole bunch of people speaking, I'll play it safe. As I'm talking now, I'm talking to you, and on this podcast, I'm thinking, gosh, I need to give good answers that make sense. And there's a bit of playing it safe there if it comes up. It's sort of the interpersonal thing about, I don't know, wanting to be liked by other people and fit in and not judged and included and be part of everything that's going on.
That's right. That's right. So it's like it's always in the background, right? It's cozy, it's warm, and it's natural. And are there times in your life in which playing it safe has go against your values of who you want to be, and how did you manage that?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Because as fine as I think playing it safe is, and you could probably, maybe I could argue, it could be a value. It could be part of self-care or just going slow, taking it easy. There's sort of something, for me, gets really restrictive about it. It doesn't allow me a lot of latitude or movement. It's always if I play the play it safe game, it's always the one kind of option. It doesn't really allow me to do the other options that are what happen when I step out of my cozy bubble and I feel anxiety or fear or sadness or that range of things. When is that? Yeah, so playing it safe, I do that a lot with people. Undoubtedly, and I will play it safe. And for me, and my career, my work, and what I do, I've gone down this funny road of ending up doing a lot of speaking in front of people, public speaking, and it's just been great. And it's a real, gosh, if I was able to talk to myself now, like my 20-year-old self now, and say, "Hey, this is going to be your career. This is what I would have been freaking out, thinking you're crazy. What is that?" And the reason for that was I played it safe a lot. I would kind of hold back and not put myself out there, and not speak my mind or say my truth or contribute in ways that I think would have been important. And coming from a place where it was okay just to speak and say, this is what I think, and this is what I believe. This is how I see the world. And so that both probably meant that I missed a lot of opportunities to do my work, connect more deeply with people, but also had this sort of funny kind of message to myself. Like every time I did it, so that little voice was like, aha, see, I told you, you're not really that important. I don't know. Compounded it a little bit.
I see. And Joe, how did you make that shift? How did you make that shift from playing it safe all the time with people to do all the super cool things you're doing these days?
I wish I could say I had a magic pill I took. It was like, bang, it all disappeared. What was it? It was a lot of practice. And it was a lot of, in fact, when it came to public speaking, there's actually two things that there is a magic pill, two magic pills. And one was being kind to myself. And I swear to God, that made such the big difference to me. It was just like ease the pressure off. It was when I was going to speak, just put my hand literally on my chest and say, this is okay. Good enough is okay. And that was just like water being poured onto a dry desert. And that made such a huge difference. And the other thing I did was at the same time, I just kept practicing. I kept putting myself into situations and kept up with it. And weirdly, I found the more I didn't do that other thing, the more I kind of sort of practiced putting myself out there, the easier it got. I sort of had to go along hand in hand with that, being kind to myself while I was doing it, rather than pushing myself, I must speak in public. That probably wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, so it's very interesting what you're saying, because I think sometimes if we're playing it safe too much, we become very self-critical and very harsh with ourselves. So I can see how being kind in some way gives you permission to just do what you need to be doing. And you mentioned also practicing a couple of times. I know for myself, when I have been, and I'm still very self-conscious of the way I talk, I will rehearse hundreds of times. I can be rehearsing one full day for a 5-minute talk. So rehearsing could be another playing it safe move at times. I know it has been for me in the past. How do we check that the rehearsing and the practicing doesn't become another playing it safe move that will keep you stuck? How did you manage that?
Yeah, for sure. Because it's important to rehearse and practice, right? Like,
of course. I do
something. Yeah, exactly. I want to deliver what I say. That's got with impact and be entertaining and fun and interesting to people. And I know for a fact if I just roll out there with no practice, it's going to be a shitty experience. So when does it kind of tip? I reckon there's like it's just like a quality to it. I feel like, because I don't think I could probably say, just looking at it, the activity, you could say that's playing it safe and that's not, just the observation of it. But the quality on the inside, I know it's like when I've got my fists clenched up and my shoulders go up and tighten up and I just get rigid and feel like, ugh. And that's often when I'm playing it safe. Like when I'm feeling the practice and rehearsing feels very defensive. Like I'm defending myself against something really bad happening. I'm preparing myself. When it's about something different, practicing and rehearsing because I want to enjoy it, I want to give something, I want to contribute, blah, blah. It has a real different quality. Like my shoulders are down. I sit up. I'm breathing. I'm having fun. I'm creative. I'm not like attending to threat. My mind isn't going and thinking about the 101 ways this is all going to go wrong. So that's fists are unclenched, shoulders drop down. So that's the quality of it. For me, that's the way I know when I'm playing it safe versus when I'm not.
That's really powerful, right? And anything could become a playing it safe move. Like everything can be a playing it safe move. So it's beautiful that you check, okay, how I'm doing this, the quality of the rehearsing in this case. If I can ask a little bit more, Joe, one of the things that happens to me at times is that I can be doing this podcast, I can be writing something, and then quickly my mind will come with all kinds of criticism. Up and down, left and right. I can't believe you say that. And sometimes I start replaying things that I have said or done wrong in the past. And then, of course, quickly go into how bad it's going to be in the next minute. If you have moments like that, when your mind goes a little bit wild and very critical, what would you do? If I'm next to you, what do I see you doing on the outside? And what do you do in the inside?
If I was like if my mind was if my mind was doing that, I was really caught up with it, you probably would see me just go really quiet. You probably see me not saying a lot, asking questions. It's a nice thing to do. I like to do, like, don't ask me about me, talk about you and make it easy for me.
I know that.
Right. Yeah. Those would be definitely the kind of things I do. I'd probably be just distracted too, because I'd be worrying about, I don't know, the things coming up, or I'd be worrying about how I was coming across, what I was saying, if the person I was talking to was listening, was saying the right things and those kind of things. That's definitely, that'd be the quality I'd be if I was getting really wrapped up with it. Yeah.
Got it. And if you handle it in a different way, using active skills, what would you be doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. You don't want to. My mum always said to this: half the battle is just noticing what's going on. I was like, that's really a good piece of wisdom, Mum. Like, because I feel like it is half the battle. Because so much of the time I just go through my life and I'm just wrapped up in my head. I don't even know what's going on. It's like happening to me. And as soon as I start to realize and go, pop, something's happening here. Oh, this is one of those things. There's my mind at it again. I'm ahead of the game. I've got options suddenly then that just weren't available to me before. There's 101 options just suddenly appear in front of me. And typically those options would be, one of my favorite ones is when I notice that happening, is just to come back in the moment and I wiggle my toes, stand up straight. And then I just go, it's just about, I can feel myself like letting that stuff go. It feels tantalizing. Like I want to hold on to it and engage with it, but I'm suddenly like, I don't have to. That's something I can let go of, because that really just is not helpful to me. And man, I love that feeling. It's like, oh, wow. Of course. Why didn't I think of this earlier? It's such a nice feeling. And there's other options might come out. I had this yesterday. I was walking down the road and I was dropping my son off to school, and I was just feeling a bit deflated and just a bit meh about stuff. And I kind of like suddenly realized what was going on. And then I suddenly also realized to myself, oh, this is because I'm really tired, because I had a late night the night before and haven't slept well. So I know this happens to me when I get tired. Like my thoughts have this kind of quality to them. And it was such a nice thing. It was like, oh, okay, I'm just tired. I need to then just go easy with myself. That's what I need to do. Rather than old me would have gone, oh, faster, harder, you're doing something wrong, stop being so negative, be positive, and blah, blah, blah.
That's super helpful. Can I ask a little bit more? And first, I also want to say thank you to your mom. That was a very wise advice. I love it. I love it. The first one, notice. I love it. It's true, right? How often we're stuck in our heads and we don't even know it. We're hours and hours living in our heads. You mentioned just moments ago that one of the things that you will have done, your old self may have been very busy trying to think positive. This is something that a lot of people do these days because they have received messages that every time you have an unwanted thought or a self-criticizing thought, you have to replace it with something good and tell yourself how good you are. And you and I may think alike about this, but how do you see it? What do you think about that? If people are listening to us and they have received those messages, they have to think positive every time they have a bad thought about themselves.
I would say don't waste your time. More effective and efficient ways to go about things.
I
Honestly.
love it.
Yeah, it's just such a burden on people's shoulders when all that stuff cranks up, and then somehow we have to think positively, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's such an extra thing. When there are much better approaches and technologies we can use to pop ourselves out of this, to create some space and distance from that. It's when I get caught in that have to think positive loop, all I'm doing is just amplifying it. And there's another thing, and I'm pretty good at thinking positively, honestly. I think most people are, but we can generate positive thoughts and look on the bright side and whatnot. It's just that it's really tiring. And then, when it doesn't work and when eventually the negative thoughts come back in, I'm ready for a double dose of, oh my gosh, I failed again. And it just kind of perpetuates itself. When I learn those skills and promote space and distance from my thinking and create that step backness, it's such a more elegant, efficient way of responding. Yeah. I would say though, I find it quite counterintuitive though. It doesn't come naturally to me. It feels kind of weird.
Yeah, I remember when I was learning ACT, right, the whole idea of acknowledging that we don't have control of our thoughts and that there is a difference between pushing through or powering through versus accepting. It felt, oh my gosh, how do I do this in my day-to-day life, right? So what would you encourage people to try, given that it feels a little bit different to not go into this thinking positive mode?
Yeah, so that there's that one really key piece is about recognizing when we're doing it. So when we're getting hooked and entangled with thoughts, and there's a couple of metaphors like hooked with thoughts or entangled with, or when our thoughts are really close up to us. That ability to recognize that kind of comes from the types of thoughts that do that, the kinds of situations when that's more likely, what kinds of thoughts I tend to get hooked with is so powerful. And straight away, there's that ability just to have space. And you said this before, you said, thank your mind. It's a cool way to do that, which is like, oh, thank you. I see what you're doing there. And it's overly helpful or trying to keep me safe or protect me. Great. And I wonder if I could just have a little space from you at the moment. It's for me, just a really nice, powerful way of creating that space and distance. I also think that it helps me when I add something into that space. Like it's not just about the space, because I want to make that useful, and having a question, which is, and now what would I like to do? And now what's my next step if I could choose it, becomes really helpful because it empowers me a bit. It makes me feel like that's useful, some alternatives, I've got some room to move. So that's, I find, a really big part of responding effectively to those thoughts.
Yeah. I like what you're saying. It really sounds much more elegant, right? Joe, one of the things you have been interested the last couple of years and you have written about it is this topic of self-esteem. And by the way, I absolutely love your book. It's such a impactful book. My clients love it. So thank you for all the hard work you have put on it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask you, what's the story behind this book? How did you decide that?
Well, what's the story? It's written together with a good friend of mine, Rich Bennett, and him and I have had a long interest in this area, and he has his own journey in terms of his particular interest in it, and I have it certainly in mine. I've always been fascinated by the ability for this self-esteem, the self-stories, the narratives we hold about ourselves to be so powerful and bend and warp reality around us in ways that just, it's amazing to me. And that's certainly my own journey of realizing the impact that old stories had on me, and just the way that I saw things and related to people and didn't see things. And when I finally I was able to take some alternative perspectives and just see sort of more widely, it was just blew my mind, because going back, I'd always had this sort of funny feeling, like for me, when I get caught up with those old self stories, they're really old and painful ones. They're really old and painful. And it's often about not belonging, not fitting in, being on the outside. And the thing that I never could get my head around was, they're really painful, and it's a horrible place to be in. But quietly to myself, there was always something that kind of drew me into it, and it was a weird sensation. I felt it was just about like it felt like a comfortable old slipper to put on, and as painful and lonely a place it was, there was just this weird comfort about going into that place. And I just for so long never could get my head around why is that. And equally when I was working with people, they would say the same kind of things, so much so that it was very easy to get into arguments with people when they'd be fighting their corner and saying, this is the reason why I'm worthless. These are the reasons I'm not important. Here's all the list of catalog of things to say that I'm a terrible person. And it felt like the question is, why are you putting up such a fight? And I'd ask myself that, why am I putting up such a fight? And why am I so drawn to this? So that's the thing that drew us into that, like how to answer that question and how to, obviously we're not just the only people thinking that, but how ACT and acceptance and values can shine a light on that important question, which is that, of course, we get drawn into things. There are good reasons for that. And this is why that idea of playing it safe is so important. I believe that when I and people get entangled with our self-stories, there's something very safe about it. There's something very cozy about it. Weird. Something very old slipperish about it.
Yeah.
Which is, it seems weird to say the place we're talking about is like a lonely, disconnected, isolated, on my own, don't belong, not good enough, worthless. And yet in that place is something very kind of cozy. And that's the thing. It's so crucial to understand, like, what has contributed to that coziness? How does that safety generated? And what's the person's history over time? Like that they've learned that's a safe place to be, because that's the key, right? Because this cozy, warm prison that we find ourselves in. And it's like all the time we've got the key kind of dangling around our neck. It's like, how do we get out? Well, there's the key. Let's figure out our way out of this cozy place and, a life on the outside.
So it's interesting that it's exactly as you're saying. It's so familiar, it's so cozy, and we go back there, right? It's a very familiar, very safe move. And in some way it protects us. It protects us from doing something different, from facing a hard conversation. But it's very tricky. It's very tricky. As you guys were working on the topic, what would you say are the ACT processes or the ACT skills that you see that have been much more helpful to people? As you were writing, are you trying to put them in paper so people can work through them, right? If people are listening to us and they read your book, what are those skills that you will encourage them to slow down and to dive?
Yeah. Well, there's a good place. Slow down and dive in. That's a really nice place to start. And with all this, we had this interesting metaphor we developed through the book, which was just a way to help people get eyes on this stuff. Because for me, that I didn't see how this thing operated for a long, long time. I didn't see the impact it had on me, and which was the way it made me play it safe all the time, the way it didn't allow me to value myself, or it didn't let me see the way other people valued me. It was like it got in the way. And so the metaphor we developed was like this thing we keep talking about, the self-story, operated a little bit like we have this sort of cozy relationship with a monster, not just like a monster that's big and scary. Of course it is. It's got teeth, right? It's got claws and whatnot, big yellow eyes. And yeah, it is. Yeah, by definition. But it's one of those monsters like Sully. Do you remember Sully from Monsters, Inc.? He was the big tall one, and he had this sort of plush purple fur. Remember him?
Remember Sully? Yeah, of course.
So he was both scary, but also really cuddly. And that quality represents the sort of the both parts of this coziness. So they are scary, but also the bigness. They protect us. They're nice to put our arms around. They're cozy and familiar. We know them. We just they have a kind of indentation of us. So it's just this sort of sense of what's known. It's there's nothing unusual or not known here. This sort of about it, which is really appealing. As much as they hold us and keep us to play it safe and don't allow us to do anything else, they grip us really tightly or whisper things in our ear to tell us how terrible and worthless we are. We can never have that because that's the kind of person we are. That metaphor ran right throughout, and it turned out to be a really helpful thing to help people get a sense of, here's this thing, get eyes on this. Once you get eyes on it, then you can start to do something different with it. You don't always have to kind of engage with it.
The metaphor is very powerful, right? I think it really captures the essence of what these stories are. They can be really scary and painful, right? Like, I'm a mess, I don't fit in, I'm lonely. But at the same time, they are so familiar, they protect us. They have this cozy quality. So if people are listening to us, we will invite them to slow down and just notice how their monster looks and sounds maybe. What else do they do? So if I notice that one of my stories is, I am unlovable. No one will ever love me. I am unworthy of love. And that's my monster. And the way that I handle that story is by disconnecting from relationships, or if I talk to people, I want to make sure I throw a joke so they remember myself with a smile. I never rock the boat. I don't ask too much for what I need. So if I map my monster like that, then what else will I do? Giving you work and expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of pain in that monster, isn't there? Wow. It's got a lot of pull to it. And the very first thing I do is that's we got eyes on the teeth and the claws. I want to hear more about the fur and the ways in which what makes that monster so appealing? Because for anyone, for me, for you, for people listening, we got to understand the appeal of this monster. Because when we understand the appeal of it, that's when we can start really beginning to let this monster go. As we can understand why this monster has played such an important role in our lives, has maybe in some instances kept us alive. It's so important. And then we can approach this monster with some dignity, some respect, and thankfulness, and begin to renegotiate the terms of the relationship, essentially. And the terms of that relationship is, rather than the monster doing the leading and saying, this is what you can and can't do, the terms of the relationship become more about what I want, what you want, what we want in our lives, and that are going to be, that'll lead to a life that's rich, fun, fulfilling. And those are the things that then start to guide how the relationship works, so that we can, of course, then listen to that monster, but we don't always take it so seriously. We can thank our monster, appreciate the hard work it's doing. And crucially, as we acknowledge the role the monster's done and why it's so important, it's a little bit like, rather than the monster standing in the doorway in terms of where we go to the next in our life, it's kind of, we grab the monster by the hand and say, come on, let's go. You and me together. We're going to go on this ride together. I'm not going to fight with you. I'm certainly not going to get rid of you. You're an important part of me and my history. And I want you to come with me on this next stage. But I'm going to choose it. I'm going to be the one saying where we go, but you're going to come along with. And that's the kind of the next steps. And monsters like that. Yeah, they like to be listened to and respected. And they're often, I find, willing to try out new things. Kind of cool.
As you were talking, I am visualizing myself walking with all the stories I have my whole life, right? I'm just visualizing exactly that. We're just walking on the street and just holding my monster. It has this yellow outfit, right? But it's coming with me. So I absolutely love that. It's really also the other thing, Joe, that was coming as you were talking, there was this softness. There was so much gentleness that was coming up when I was thinking about my own stories and holding them with me as I'm holding the hand of the monster. I'm wondering here, when you present this to people and they try to understand how their monster shows up and how it has been protecting them, and they negotiate a new relationship with them, sometimes it's going to be hard, because some of these stories are very historical. They have been reinforced. They really have protected us for hundreds of times, right? And the monster can be a little bit louder, maybe screaming at you. So if people have that monster, a monster that is very tough and doesn't want to negotiate again a relationship, what would people do in those moments when the monster keeps screaming?
Sure, yeah. You got to talk to the monster, right? That's the number one rule would be like, let's not fight with it. Let's not antagonize it, provoke it, because monsters are exceptionally skilled at winning arguments. They're exceptionally skilled at shouting down. They've got their kind of their tricks, and they're really good. Like you say, they've done it 100 times, 1,000 times before. So whatever we're going to do, it needs to be new, because we can't fight them on their own terms. And it's not about fighting. It's going to be about slowing them down and listening, and finding out the kind of things that they're scared of. What are they worried about? What do they not want to happen? And learning as that relationship is redeveloped, establishing it on the basis of mutual respect. This monster will come along with, and its fears will be listened to and acknowledged and validated. And that also means that the monster and the person indeed has to have the space to talk about, like, where did this monster come from? Why is it there? So those history pieces become really important. And in the moment, it's it's like I keep using this sort of renegotiating the terms of the relationship, which sounds quite artificial. But it does take some time, right? It's like, I often think of a bit like couples therapy. It never happens. Well, I've never had the experience in couples therapy, which is one session, bang, and the couple are like, oh, great, okay, we see each other eye to eye now. Job done. Takes a little time to hear each other out and kind of get everything there. So that's what I usually say to people. On one, allow it to take some time. Don't rush it. And in the moment, just be kind of, this is a tough ask, but be a little gentle with the monster, firm but gentle, slow and steady. Don't look to dismiss or antagonize, and be like just slow and firm is a really nice stance that monsters, in my experience, often listen to and take on board.
Well, I think which monster doesn't like to be listened to, right? Like all monsters want to have the space in our life, right? They don't want to lose the space, right?
Yeah.
They want to be with us.
Yeah.
I even use the term of renegotiating that relationship, and I think that's what it is. I think that's exactly what it is. Right? It's just developing a new sense of connection, perhaps with this story in a way that doesn't take over. If I can ask a little bit more, I think that sometimes these monsters have also organized our behaviors in regard to other relationships, and we are scared of having courageous conversations. We're scared of asking for what we need in a relationship. We're scared of rocking the boat. Dating is another plane. It's a move, and it's very, I think, sometimes may keep relationships alive, but then we don't live authentic lives. We actually shrink ourselves.
Yeah.
If people are managing the story with that behavior, with placating, what would you encourage them to try? Can they do something about it?
Nice. Yeah, it's such an important point. Like, it's funny, isn't it? Placating can be so forced. People who placate are nice to be around, right? By definition.
Easygoing.
Yeah, easygoing. Exactly. Yeah. That's
easygoing.
Yeah. And monsters often, I find, those self stories, that part of us, as you say, that organizes our behavior to keep our vulnerable bits protected, will love a set of behaviors that is about doing that, which is like keeping relationships with other people easygoing. So other people are less likely to be threatening. But so, as you say, it just it makes it very hard then to do those other things that are also really important, articulating needs and acting upon needs. So I think a really important point is to do lots of practicing, trying out new things. And it's I think for a couple of purposes at least. One is it's a bit like a rubber band, right? If you're stretching a rubber band, you want to stretch it right out and then let it come back, and you have a bit more, the rubber band is a bit bigger. So as we practice new behaviors and try them out, we want to try out and give ourselves new ways of doing things, so it's more available to us. The other thing, of course, is it's in some ways a little bit to, I wouldn't tell a monster this, but it's a little bit to provoke the monster a bit, which is start practicing things and saying, hey, this is how this is going to be. This is what this is going to be like. And then help the person then, as they're doing a new behavior, have a couple of skills to talk, communicate, and be with their monster, with their self-story differently. So they go into it and go, and if they're doing something different to placating, I don't know, expressing needs, they're prepared and ready. This is going to be a time your monster's probably going to get active. Get ready for it. Notice, what is it going to say? What tricks is it going to have up its sleeve? And what would you like to do differently when it does the things we know it's going to do? Having that kind of entering into a scary situation or out of a comfort zone, but in a prepared way, becomes like a really nice experiment, right? Like a new way to do things, which I find is so super helpful. So rather than it just being sprung on a person, it's kind of different.
That's right. And I think as you were talking, one of the things that came to me is that it's so important to know when your monster shows up and when it's going to get louder and bigger and heavier, right? And I think once we know that, we can expect. We know that the monster is going to show up. It's a matter of time in some way, right? We're going to prepare. I can ask one more question. One of the things that relationships require, all relationships requiring adjustment, negotiating our needs, and sometimes we have to put the relationship needs above us, right? For people who have, let's say, an ongoing pattern of placating and making sure they don't rock the boat, I can hear they will say, but it works, right? Because the relationship is winning. How will you help people to distinguish there is a difference between placating because you're playing it safe versus putting at times the relationship needs above yours so that relationship can grow? It's such a subtle difference.
Yeah, it definitely, isn't it? Yeah. It reminds me kind of what we were talking about at the start of this conversation about knowing the difference between playing it safe and not. Because that's the question. If we're asking people to say on the basis of what the behavior looks like, that's really hard because, there are times, absolutely, the placating is I don't know, it's a helpful thing to do. Yeah, for sure. The quality I'd be drawing people's attention would be what the feel is like on the inside, and then helping them over time to tell the difference between what feels like old school, really familiar, dry, dusty, boring, standard, all the stuff you usually do, actions or placating, versus when it feels different, when it maybe feels fresh, alive, it feels a little new, and there's vitality to it. And be able to make that distinction is going to be so important. And the latter is probably those times when we are slowing down, pausing, and monsters perhaps there, but we have a little bit of space from the monster, and we're able to ask ourselves a question like, what's important to me? How would I like to do this? If I could choose, what might happen now? And probably that's a situation that's going to be more likely to develop or fresh, new, and vital. Probably, not always, but possibly. So helping a person just check that at each moment and ask themselves that question, I think, is really important.
I think you're right. I think it makes a huge difference, so we can slow down a little bit. Many things happen at once, right? Like we get overly stimulated with so many things, but I think just really digging into what am I sensing right now, or what am I noticing, and just stepping back a little bit makes a difference. I have one last question. Is that okay?
It's fine, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
And I wish I can have you for hours and hours. I love the work you have been doing and how you just talk about it. I love it. If you were to have a cup of tea or coffee with any person you want, who will that be today and why?
Yeah. Okay. So drink of choice would be a single malt scotch. Yep. And then we'll see where we go from there. Something really kind of peaty and smoky by preference, or maybe a cup of tea. But the person in mind, okay, and this is, I haven't really thought too deeply about it. Let's see where it goes, because there's probably something that's connected there, would be Jim Morrison. And he would be the person that I would want to sit down and at least have a cup of tea with. He, to me, is a fascinating character as someone who certainly lived life very fast. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, but there's some qualities to him that as someone who grew up listening to his music since I was 5 years old, and I just love the soulfulness he brings to his music and his singing. It's incredible. And I'm fascinated by people who live their lives so fast. And in the space of when the Doors started and he finished, such a short space of time. And so I'm interested in kind of those lives. And I know that's probably there's not always good, healthy things. That means that life gets burned so fast, but some qualities there that I think are more about his creativity and the kind of music and the way he sung and performed. I just love to sit out and have a drink with him and say, what's that all about? Where did that come from? Tell me about that. I think that'd be a fascinating conversation.
Nice. So after this, after our talk, I definitely going to listen to Jim Morrison. Which song would you recommend me to listen to?
The classic would be something like Light My Fire, but if you're sort of like a maudlin mood and just something like dark, it's an Unknown Soldier I kind of quite like. He's such a great voice, and that electric piano is just it's so powerful. I love that sound. It's a beautiful sound.
They
go so well together.
I'm going to definitely listen to the songs. He was a very talented musician. Dear Joe, thank you so much for having a chance to chat today. Please know that I'm a big fan of your work, and I hope I can bring you back to the podcast again.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Thanks so much. It's been so fascinating talking about this stuff and having your questions. And it's absolutely great work you're doing. So I'm really honored to be here and have this time. So thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, I will very much appreciate it if you will subscribe and share this podcast with your friends. And if you're feeling extra generous, I welcome a review on Apple Podcasts. Show notes of this episode are in the website playingitsafe.zone. Make sure to subscribe to my newsletter so you can receive more tips to stop all types of unworkable playing it safe actions. See you soon!